Have you ever left a meeting thinking, I thought they understood me, but your team walked away thinking something totally different? This episode is for you. Because confusing communication, it just doesn't create mistakes. It creates a hidden cost. It slows our teams down, it kills trust, and it wastes hours of effort. So today, we're going to expose that hidden cost. We're going to show you where unclear communication is quietly draining your team's energy, and most importantly, how to fix it for good. This is the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast, and I am your host, John Espinosa. I help retain and hire your best employees by building high-performance teams. We're going to get into the content today, and this episode is going to kick off Season 21. Season 21 is going to be all about communication, and we're going to start today about what that hidden cost looks like. So, mastering communication is a lifelong journey. I will tell you, at 45 years old, I still am learning tricks and characteristics in practicing communication techniques. And one of the things that this episode is going to point out is confusion in how that costs us as leaders, as business owners. And so, what I learned most about communication breakdowns so far in my short life is it's not because people don't care or they just don't want to do something. A lot of times it's because we are not clear. We haven't created that clarity around our message. So today we're going to go over 3 hidden costs of unclear communication. We're going to talk about how to run a clarity check on our messages. And then last, we're going to really discover how to build a clarity-first culture. And so let's get into 3 hidden costs of unclear communication. I think it's important for us to start here because confusing direction, it really plays a role on teams' frustration. And anybody who has worked for a leader or has been a part of a company that just doesn't really understand what message is trying to be communicated, then we lose trust. And when we begin to lose trust, that starts to degrade everything else. The other big thing is we lose time because now we're having to go back and forth or we're having to rework. And then last but not least, all of that, we begin to lose momentum. And motivation starts first and then momentum follows, because as organizations think they're over communicating or they think they're communicating the right thing, what happens? Frustration builds, and then we begin to separate, get out of alignment. All of those things that we talk about that great organizations, they do well, begin to degrade. So let's talk about the first hidden cost here. And I mentioned it earlier, it's rework. It's the do it again tax. And anybody who has done something and then been really, really proud of it, whether it's a report or maybe it's a presentation that you put together, or maybe you think that you're doing something as far as sales, you're making the calls or you're closing the clients, whatever that looks like. And then your boss comes to you, or you as a leader go back to your employees and say, yeah, that's not what I really wanted. Do it again. Can you get it to me later? And so this do it again tax, this rework, we got to understand, when we talk about get it done soon or do it again, like even that begins to muddy the water along communication. And so the second one we're going to talk about is as you have unclear communication, what begins to happen? Resentment. Resentment is the second hidden cost. And one of the things that I hear very often from leaders or business owners is, well, they should have known, even from parents. They should have known. They should have known what I was thinking. They should have known what I was talking about. And that begins to build resentment on both sides, from the person who's communicating the message and the person who's receiving the message. Well, I didn't know. You didn't tell me. You weren't unclear. And then the communicator, well, you should have known. You know me. We've worked together for 10 years or 5 years, whatever that looks like. And so that resentment begins to build. And then the third hidden cost is resistance. So when frustration builds up, that resentment builds up, now it's like, why bother? Why even try? So delay begins to happen, mistrust, all of those things again begin to bubble up from the surface, and they'll just wait. They'll just wait until either you're gone as the leader, the manager of that team, or they're just going to wait the longest possible. They'll procrastinate until you ask them, hey, remember that report we talked about last week? How are we doing on that? And you're like, well, I was waiting for some more clear direction. You're like, what are you? And then you get into that conversation. What are you talking about? I needed that report tomorrow. And they were like, well, you weren't very clear, and I didn't trust that I could go back to you without you biting my head off. So that begins to happen. Everyone, a quick break in the episode today. Are you struggling to find and keep the right employees? You're not alone. High turnover drains time, money, and morale, leaving us frustrated, overwhelmed, and feeling like we have to settle for less. I understand how tough hiring can be because I've lived it. And with over 21 years of building high-performance teams, I know how to turn hiring challenges into lasting employee success. Through my proven lead framework, we're going to analyze your processes, design a personalized strategy, and implement solutions that create confident and long-term results. Don't let turnover hold you back. Choosing this program is that first step towards a thriving workplace. Enroll today at thejohnespinosa.com and build the team you deserve. Imagine a team that works seamlessly together, or keep facing the same costly cycle of turnover. The choice is yours. Now back to our episode. So those are the 3 hidden costs of unclear communication. Now we're going to get into the second piece. But before we do that, I want to give you an application, because this is all about practical application. We're going to do a lot of applications and practical things that you can do as a leader, as a communicator, to make sure that you're getting that message across. So one of the questions that I like to ask teams is, where do we keep losing clarity? And there's 3 areas that I've identified that most teams lose clarity around. 1, direction. I'm giving somebody a direction and it's unclear. 2 is decisions. Like, I make a decision as the boss and that decision is unclear. And so they start to go execute, right? And then, nope, we got to go back and rework. And then 3 is delegation. Well, I thought you assigned that to John. Nope, I assigned it to you. So you see how that works. Those 3 areas where, ask your team, like, sit down, put them around the table. You got to establish that trust. You got to have trust in your team before everything starts to break down. But those 3 areas are where people lose clarity the most, where teams lose clarity: direction, decisions, and delegation. So start there. So let's get into the clarity check. That's our second topic for this episode. And when we talk about clarity, you can't fix confusion if you don't know where it's happening. And so we try to throw fixes. We put Band-Aids on things, but what happens is we aren't sure. So we're just throwing darts at a dartboard with a blindfold on, trying to fix our communication. The first thing that I always hear from companies that you walk in, you're like, yeah, your communication stinks, is, okay, well, we're just going to over-communicate. We're going to say it 7 times. We're going to put it in emails. We're going to put it on the walls. We're going to send it in IMs. And over-communicating is the number one mistake that most people make, because that necessarily might not be where the confusion is. So let's talk about these clarity checks here. There's 3 areas. First, check your words. Look for vague terms. When you talk about, let's just say, a deadline, and people, you got a project and you tell people ASAP. Well, as soon as possible. Their soon could be maybe a week, because they got 5 other projects that they're working on. So that project is the 6th when the other 5 are getting done, but your soon as possible meant close a business tomorrow. The other one is, can you do that a little better? Just go back and, do it a little better. Well, what does that look like? right? So the words we use mean things, and that's where we can work on clarity by really getting down into the details with our words. So follow up with like close of business. Can I get that? What does it look like if I can get that tomorrow, close of business? 4 p.m. even. I would even be more specific because close of business, maybe people are working longer hours, or maybe it's a half day. I run into that situation where Friday is a half day. They're only there till noon, and you need it before noon or something like that. So be very clear around the words that we use, especially when we're talking about, can you do that a little better? Or maybe get that to me as soon as possible. Put a day, put a time, put a metric on it. Instead of making 3 phone calls a day, make 5 to 7 phone calls today. That's what a little better looks like. The other clarity check, the second one, is check our channels. Check our channels of communication. So where do our messages, where are they losing strength? And I find this a lot in emails. People love to write like novels in emails. I will tell you from what I've seen and what a lot of research says, if it's more than 5 to 7 sentences, people aren't going to read into the details. If you got details buried, don't bury the lead. It's a classic kind of paper communication article type strategy that they teach you in communication school. But if you've buried the lead in the 10th sentence, I'm not getting there. So checking your channels, how are messages, what's the strength? Where is it getting lost? Are the details getting lost in the emails? Or better yet, maybe you got a Slack or an IM message thread and you're putting direction or maybe decisions in that thread or text, right? And it's getting lost because as people are responding, maybe you're saying good morning and you're remember, hey, that report's due, and then you tell them good morning. Well, 10 other people on your team are going to tell you good morning, and guess where that decision was or that direction was? It's up top. So where is the strength? Where is that message getting lost in your channels? And then third, along the clarity check, is check your follow-up. A lot of times we communicate a really clear message. It's gone across, we've gotten into the details. We've let them know when it's due or, how better it needs to be. We've put it in up front in our emails. Then the last thing that we do, we got to close that loop. We got to close that communication loop of sender, receiver, and then feedback. And that's accomplished by follow-up. So here, clarity doesn't stick unless it's confirmed. That's the big takeaway here. Make sure that they followed up, especially if you're asking like when they can get it due. Hey, can you get that to me by 4 p.m. tomorrow? If they don't follow up with that, maybe they haven't heard it. Maybe it's gotten lost. I always assume positive intent when it comes to communication. So just give them a little bit of time and then ping them. Just wanted to make sure you saw my last message, right? So get that follow up. It's that confirmation that we need to close that feedback loop, right? So here, one application when we talk about clarity check is take one project, any project that's on your plate right now that you've either delegated or you're running yourself. I want you to ask yourself this 2 questions. Did I say what I meant? So maybe it's a project meeting, it's a follow-up, it's a status check. Did I say what I meant? And then did they hear what I said? That's how you're going to ensure that clarity. Those 2 questions are going to create clarity, which again goes back to everything that we're talking about, productivity, making sure that they're clear on what the deliverable looks like or what the intent or what they're supposed to go out and perform, all of those things. That's the second topic. So the clarity check. Let's talk about how we can create a clarity first culture. So think, do, be. We've talked about how we need to think about communication, how we behave, the things that we need to do to communicate. Now, how are we going to integrate it into our companies, into our teams, where it's part of our culture, part of our being, right? So here, we can't just demand that communication gets better. We have to model it, and we have to really, I put down in here, we got to reward it. Culture is all about what we celebrate and what we tolerate. So if we're going to tolerate bad communication, unclear communication to occur within our teams, within our organizations, that is what's going to happen. That's what they think that we are rewarding, right? What we're going to celebrate is bad communication. So we have to flip that script, and it begins with us. That's the first step here to creating a clarity first culture is self-clarity. And I look at myself all the time like, what outcome do I need to get out of this communication. Because if I can't communicate that outcome, there's going to be a lot of interpretation, a lot of fuzziness within that communication method, whether it's an IM, whether it's an email, whether it's in person, whether it's a virtual communication, one to many, one to one, whatever your communication looks like. We're going to get into all of that during this season, but it starts with you. So you got to be clear in your mind first, what outcome do you need? Then the second one, normalize clarifying questions. So your culture, and this is built on trust, people need to be able or feel really empowered to ask you, hey, I just want to restate that, what you just said, to make sure I understand. When people can do that, that's when now we as an organization, now we're communicating, now we're hitting on all cylinders, we're asking clarifying questions. But again, it starts with us. It starts with us. We have to normalize that. It has to be part of our culture where we build that safe environment in there where we're not going to go, well, what are you talking about? Weren't you listening to me? We said that 30 minutes ago. If you come back like that, they're going to shut down. And the next time that you mention something and it's unclear, they're not going to ask. So create that, normalize those clarifying questions. And then last, we got to reward. We got to reward others who are modeling good communication within our teams, within our organizations. Let them know, hey, thank you. The 3 areas here: summarize, confirm, and then follow up. When you see someone doing all 3 of those things, give them a kudos. Call it out in the team meeting if that's the type of person that they are. Some people don't like that public recognition, but for the most of all, we got to let others know that, hey, that's what I want out of somebody. That's what I feel is a good communicator, right? Those are the things that embody really everything that we want within our communication culture. So 3 things today. Remember, we want to remove the confusion task. And the way that we do that is we identified those 3 hidden costs. We talked about the clarity check that we can do during, one of our messages, our channels, and then our follow-up. And then last, how we build a clarity first culture. So to wrap up our episode today, clear communication, it isn't work. It's what makes all the work actually count. So remember, as leaders, we just don't talk. We create clarity others can trust. I believe in you. Go be great. Talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye.